Let's go ahead then and we'll get started with our next session, which is our Ask Everything session. We have two experts kind of in this area who have very graciously agreed to be our answer people for this session. Jay Weitz from OCLC and Damian Iseminger from Library of Congress. Let me do some brief introductions and then we'll get started. Jay Weitz is a senior consulting database specialist in OCLC metadata policy. He is OCLC liaison to MOUG, OLAC, Mark Advisory Committee, MLA-CMC, and PCC Standards Committee. In IFLA, he sits on the Bibliographic Standing Committee representing the Cataloging Standard Committee on CCDA and is secretary of the Permanent Unimark Committee. He is the author of Cataloger's Judgment, both editions of Music Coding and Tagging, and the Q&A columns of the MOUG newsletter and OLAC newsletter. He has a Bachelor of Arts in English from the University of Pennsylvania and an MLS from Rutgers University and an MA in Education from Ohio State University. Jay was the recipient of the MOUG Distinguished Service Award in 2004 and OLAC's Nancy B. Olson Award in 2005. In 2019, he was the recipient of the Music Library Association's MLA citation, and on June 30th, 2023, he plans to retire after 41 years at OCLC. So let me introduce Damian. Damian Iseminger is the head of Bibliographic Access section of the Music Division of the Library of Congress, a position he has held since January 2017. The section is responsible for the cataloging of notated music resources and monographs about music. In addition to leading the section, Damian is also acting as the assistant chief for the music division. In his role as section head, he works with the Policy Training and Cooperative Programs Division at LC in developing policy statements, guidance, and applications profiles for RDA. Damian is currently a member of the RDA Steering Committee as the Technical Team Liaison Officer, a position he has held since January 2021. In this role, he is responsible for the maintenance and development of RDA reference for use with linked data and semantic web applications and advising the RSC on technical aspects of proposals submitted by RDA users groups. This position builds on his earlier work with RDA as a member of the North American RDA Committee from 2018 to 2020 and as chair of the RDA Steering Committee Music Working Group from 2013 to 2019. So at this time, I'd like to open the floor to questions for either of these gentlemen, and be sure to just raise your hand from the reactions button on the bottom of your Zoom screen. Nobody has any questions?
Andrea.
Hey guys, this is actually a specific question for Jay. What will we ever do without you? I don't expect an answer, but just got to put it out there. But knowing that you'll be gone, if we have specific problems that in the past we've contacted you about, do you have recommendations for who we might contact at OCLC going forward?
Well, I will miss everybody. I have very mixed feelings about retiring. But to answer your real question, I'm hoping that before I leave in June, there will be a replacement for me. And I think that without giving anything away, that you will all be pleased with the person that we have in mind. As many of you know, Kate James succeeded my irreplaceable comrade, Robert Bremer, just a few months ago. And in the process of interviewing to succeed Robert, we also interviewed someone who we have had conversations with. That person will be well, we can't say that for sure, but we're hoping that that person will be the person who succeeds me. And again, I think that everyone on this call, or many of you will know this person, and will be pleased with that. I'm expecting that nobody will even notice that I'm gone. So does that answer your question?
That answers my question, but you're dead wrong about nobody noticing. If you just look in the chat, you'll see
no,
just the beginning of the floods of tears.
No, adding my own to this too. But I mean, MOUG has been a part of my life for over 40 years, and OCLC has been part of my life for 40 years. Yeah, I'm going to miss everybody, everybody who I know, and I think you all know who you are. I mean, there are plenty of people who I don't know, and that's part of the reason that I feel like I need to, that at this point, the best thing I can do is move out of the way. So that is what I'm doing. So again, I think nobody will notice that I'm gone.
Well, that sounds like a bunch of bullshit, Jay. So I think people will definitely notice because of your sparkling personality and the way you effortlessly answer all of our questions. So people can always, you will always be missed, and but never replaced.
Well, thank you, Damian. That's very kind. And thank you to everybody. It's been a difficult decision to make, and I have very mixed feelings about it, because I still love my job, and I love all of you, and you've helped make my life and my profession such a delight. Really, just I feel like I've been able to contribute a lot to the profession and to music cataloging especially, and to music librarianship as well. Just it's something I feel very mixed about anyway. So, but thank you all.
Andrea, did you have another question?
I did. And it's just in the wake of Keith's excellent presentation on aggregates, which have been something of a perplexion for us in my shop. I'm wondering, going forward, as we see records that I do a lot of authority work at my institution, need authority adjustments or something like that. How much would you recommend that how much time would you recommend that we spend actually making adjustments to legacy records going forward, either our own institutional legacy records or records in OCLC? Obviously, it's good stewardship, but how much of a difference is it going to make in the big picture in terms of the time that we would spend on it?
Well, I'll sort of answer this from a slightly different angle. I think that most institutions have data that they just are not going to touch in general, right? I mean, obviously you guys can see all of LC's pre-AACR2 work that's in the catalog that we haven't bothered to go back, that we just fix on an ad hoc basis, and we don't do anything more than that because, we all have jobs to get incoming materials cataloged and stuff like that. So, I'm sort of the opinion that, if you can come up with a way to update records and stuff that you feel comfortable with, you know, more power to you. But I don't think there's, personally speaking, I don't think there's a mandate to go back and, oh, we got to change all this and change this and change that and change that. You know, we have to, sometimes we just have to live with what we've done in the past and, you know, move on forward. But this is my opinion. I should say this is not necessarily, I'll caveat everything by saying that all of this is my opinion, not the opinion of my employer necessarily.
Well, if we have a brief contents note, for instance, would you recommend, do you think in the end it would be worth the time to add 7xx's, for instance? What do you think would be something that would be time well spent?
That's sort of hard to answer, Andrea. And to be quite honest, a lot of the stuff in, I can speak from the RDA perspective. A lot of the changes that we made in RDA, and it seems like, oh, you're making things more complex and stuff, is that we still had to serve people who wanted that complexity for certain things, versus also people who want to do, for lack of a better term, quick and dirty cataloging. So I think it just comes back to, you know, what can your shop handle and stuff. That I personally don't want to mandate or having a group say, you know, you really need to add all the analytical entries you possibly can. People don't, some people can do that, but other people can't. So I just feel like part of what's happened in RDA is to be flexible, and that's why there's so many different options and stuff. That, to go back to Keith's excellent presentation on aggregates, for example, you know, we made it possible that you only need to say one thing about one of the expressions that are manifested in that manifestation, because we recognize that some people only want to do that, but other people want to do more. So I feel like it's more what you're comfortable with, what your workload is like, and going from there.
That's great. I honestly don't want any more work. Thank you. I was just wondering whether there was any one particular element that was important for future linkages and things that I can't understand or even imagine, that would be recommended. And it sounds like really there isn't. So that's actually the answer I was hoping for. Thanks, Damian.
Aaron.
Since nobody else is pop up with questions, I'm just going to ask for a little more detail on this wonderful decision to start allowing performers in the 100 again. And I'm understanding that it's not a free for all. So can you give me some good examples when we still, for popular music specifically, this is popular music, because our reference librarians are definitely want us to go back to all those records and change it right now, yesterday. But can you give us some examples of when in popular music we still would be, so for example, if a composer, they composed all the works on the album, but it's performed by a different performer on the album, we would still put the composer as the 100, correct? Or one, yeah.
That is, I'm going to be completely honest here, that is my understanding, but to be honest, Keith is going to be the one who, and other members who are in this group, would have more insight into that. So I'd welcome comments about that particular question, but that is my understanding. If everything was composed by the same person, no matter what kind of album you're talking about, that person would go into the 100. Is that everybody? Is that the understanding from the people that have helped develop this guidance?
This is Keith. I would say more or less. I mean, there might be examples. I don't know if you've looked at the MLA metadata guidance document. There's a whole decision tree to help you root out where that does and does not apply. And there's a little bit of wiggle room. I think it would it would probably be safe to apply to, again, I'm going to make up a number here, like 80% of popular music albums, as long as they are all featuring like the same performer for everything. If it's like a, I don't know, Yo-Yo Ma and Friends sort of thing, probably not, because there's not focus on one particular person. But
Well, thank you for making those accommodations for popular music. Whoever was involved in that decision, it's helpful for patrons.
also a shout out to Casey, who was on the PCC policy committee, and I don't know how much of a direct hand he had in this, but I know he was involved in the deliberations over this.
And there, I always threw this out there when we redid RDA as we could go back to doing this sort of thing, but I'd have to say that other people have done the heavy lifting on this, and going way back, I feel like a lot of that discussion of going back to this also happened through stuff that Tracy Snyder and Kevin Kishimoto did way back when, I think at Cincinnati meeting, about talking about when things are better known by the performers who have done them and stuff. So this is a good step, big step, I should say, back to having a solid theoretical pinning for what Kevin and Tracy so eloquently talked about those years ago. Ethan.
Actually, I think my question may have just been answered by looking at the guidance document, but I was wondering, since in this same discussion, if then that includes 110s for bands as performers. But I just checked out that document and I did see some examples of that. So I think I answered my own question.
Oh, thank you, Ethan.
Since everybody is being quiet for a minute, sorry about that, Andrea, I'm going to go ahead and ask Jay a question. Jay, several weeks ago, there was some discussion, I think it was on MOUG, about how various thesauri were being automatically populated in the 655 fields. I think it was like the AAT, I think was one of those examples. And my question for you is that, has OCLC had any discussions on beefing up their field export options so that we can exclude certain bib, certain bib fields at a more precise level? So for example, what I would love to have is the ability to not even have a 655 with a indicator of 7 and a subfield 2 for AAT. I'd like to have it just stripped before it even hit my system. So right now, our field export options are literally at the bib number. So I can delete all 655s or all, 856 fields if that's what I wanted to do, but I can't do it at a more precise level. So do you know if they've had any discussions on that?
Well, discussions, yes. I don't know that they've actually. It's in the works. Let's put it that way. They've been working for a long time on trying to make selections like that much more precise. So I don't know when it will happen, but they're working on it.
Okay, I retire in 10 years, so we'll give them that long. Okay.
Okay. Well, I retire in 4.5 months, but and it's probably not going to be before that, but I'm not even sure about that. But they are talking about it and they are working on it.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Andrea?
Well, in an amazing coincidence, I have a question about subfield zeros in 650s too, which is that we've started seeing 650s coming into our shop records that have subfield zeros for different portions of strings. So there might be 2 or 3 subfield zeros for a string. And I was under the impression that this was not allowed, that you could only put a subfield 0 if it covered the entire string of a 650. Am I misunderstanding that?
I believe that you are correct. Although, if I remember correctly, subfield 0 is repeatable for various other reasons, but I believe you're correct.
So it's repeatable, so there's no way to kind of protect against that.
I think that's true, yeah.
Okay.
As far as validation and intra-field relationships, yeah, it's probably that would be too complicated to try to build into validation.
So
At
we
least right
need to
now.
beef up our educational efforts.
That's always a good idea.
Andrea, it seems is helping us out by having another question.
I'm so sorry, guys. And please, if any of you have other questions, I'm just going to seize the opportunity as I have it. So Jay, another question on your end. Are there any updates or exciting coming attractions type news related to linked data in terms of the structure of connection and all of this kind of thing? So, I mean, Sinopia / BibFrame, anything there that we might be interested to know about that's on the horizon in terms of what's in the workshop right now?
As far as connection is concerned, not that I'm aware of, but of course not all development, but a lot of the development, of course, is now in Record Manager, and you probably already know about the being able to control headings for controlled access points for AAT and mesh and RVM and various other authority files that we make available on through Record Manager. So those are kind of things that have been around for a while in Record Manager. That's about everything that I know right now. Is that helpful at all?
Absolutely. Is there anything coming up about the RBMS vocabularies? They seem to be kind of hovering, almost ready to be usable, but not quite. Do you know anything about what's going on with that? And then I promise everyone I'm done.
What do you mean by hovering?
Well, we had an announcement about 6 or 8 months ago. I'm sorry, my sense of time during the pandemic has, I've lost control of everything. Could have been 2 years ago for all I know. That they were, and they're in the ID system already, but they don't seem to be, I don't think that we can use any subfield zeros yet with rare book vocabularies.
I don't know.
Okay, that's
sorry.
good.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like, well, I'll go to Mark's question in the chat because I saw that first before the other hands. It's Mark asked Jay, any progress on getting the problems with the macros, with the OCLC macros sorted out so they don't freeze up?
As far as I know, they're still working on that. The functionality questions about connection client, I mean, they are very well aware of all of those issues, And as far as I know, they are continuing to work on that.
Just to add, in case people aren't able to see it, Casey also responded that he's on connection 3.1, and it seems that the freezing has stopped for him, though he does have issues with dialog boxes popping up in the background. Kevin commented that his are not freezing, and he thinks it might be related to the macro itself because there's not consistent behavior applying to all the macros. But it seems that other people still have freezing problems. So varied. Okay, I think we're good there. Anthony.
Hello. I actually had a question involving authority records. I'm very new to doing it, but I just ran into an issue involving spirituals that I was a little confused on how to handle, because I noticed that spirituals are kind of handled in two different ways. Sometimes they're handled where they don't have an author like associated with it, and then sometimes it does actually have an author associated with it, but when you actually look at it, they're actually technically an arranger, not an actual, like they didn't actually technically write the spiritual. So I was wondering, what's the best way to handle those type of situations? What is the preferred way to look at it?
Well, thank you for the question, Anthony. I could speak to situations that we have encountered in the music division with spirituals or things of that nature. A lot of the times it's unclear on music we're cataloging what is going on. Is if the name associated with the spiritual is the actual writer of the spiritual, or just they're arranging the parts and stuff. So in those cases, we've tended to treat, we'll just say that, okay, this particular arrangement is an adaptation of a spiritual, and just create a new access point for it. We sometimes, I should say, will oftentimes not create authority records for those because spirituals can tend to fall into that sort of gray area of whether you really need to create an authority record or not. So that's sometimes how we've handled that. We also get a lot of choral octavos in at the library, and we do catalog those. For a lot of my people, I'm sure it's the bane of their existence to be doing those octavos, but as a matter of expediency, and since MOUG is a lot about like practicalities, if it's unclear, we'll just treat it as an adaptation, because it's just easier that way from assigning the access points in the bibliographic record, and especially when we don't need to be creating an authority record for it. So hopefully, that helps you out a little bit. We find that especially in dealing with, let's say, like popular tunes, like for example, just hymn tunes and hymn settings in general, it's very, very tough to sometimes go back and say, well, what's the original one? That's a very tough question to get your head around. And like everyone here, we got to get product out the door. So sometimes it's just easier to be like, well, we'll just treat it as a new work and not worry about creating an authority for it.
Okay, thank you.
Catherine.
This is a question for Jay. It's going back to the macros. So we never actually went to 3. We stayed on 2.63 or whatever. Because of the macros, and then it's 263 regressed, so that we're having the freezing issues that we weren't having. So my question really is, I'm sort of like the final decision before IT gets to say, yes, we can move. I'm wondering if I should look at 3.1 at all, or just start looking at like world share record manager. Is 3.1. We didn't have to look at 3 because 2.63 was working better than 3. And so I'm kind of in a situation of, should I look at 3.1 or should I just start looking at just moving to record share? in terms of stability and capabilities?
Well, I don't know the specifics because I never use Record Manager, but I do know that some of the capabilities of macros that some of the macro capabilities of Connection Client have been actually built into Record Manager for as part of the actual application. So in that sense, you might want to look at Record Manager. Now, of course, because of technological limitations, Record Manager, you can't run macros on Record Manager. We know that. From just looking at the chat, it sounds like different people have different levels of luck, let's say, regarding the stability of the macros in 3.1 as opposed to earlier versions. So you might want to just take a look at it, test it out to see your installation, to see how your installation works, and if it works better than 2.63 does. It's yeah. Does that help at all? Not very
Yeah, I think
much.
so.
Okay.
I think so. I just want to make sure I'm not crazy for staying on 2.63 as well. But I was glad when I saw that 3.0 was going away and it never got fixed. I was like, well, I'm glad I didn't bother.
Well, it went away because it got replaced by 3.1, but
Right.
yeah.
But the issues are still there.
Well, yeah, but I guess it depends on it. There are varying reactions on 3.1, so I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Well, maybe I'll try to get oh, here we go. We got a question in the chat. Damian, any project type cataloging initiatives in the music division? Well, one of the things that will be going up soon that involved a lot of cataloging project, but mostly by one person, Ben Barba, is we're going to be posting a bunch of silent film music that has entered the public domain onto the LC site. And I don't want to step on what Ben's going to talk about because he's going to be talking about it in the lightning talks next week. So I'll let him describe it. But Ben, through various methods and working with others in the division, cataloged about 4,000 things in the space of a year for this digital project. So that's one of the big projects that's been going on. To be honest, a lot of the work that we had done, it seems, as some people have said, it seems like the pandemic or the after effects of the pandemic have been going on for a long time. And a lot of the stuff that we did during the pandemic and stuff is that when we were on site, we were working on stuff that we couldn't take off site and do via telework and stuff. And sort of the incoming material slowed to a crawl into LC. Well, that's changed now. And so we have a little bit of a backlog of monographs that have come in and sheet music. So right now we're concentrating on that quite a bit to get through a lot of that before we tackle any sort of bigger projects. In case you didn't see it on the various listservs, a lot nearly all of our primary source material for Franz Liszt has been posted, and that was a huge project that the catalogers in music division undertook when I first got at LC in 17-18. But I still like to highlight all the work that a large group of people did on Liszt, because I'm very proud of what they did. And it felt like it resolved a lot of authority problems with Liszt along the way. And so that's sort of been settled. I'd like to open it up to other LC colleagues on the call about other project type cataloging initiatives at NAVCC, for example. So I don't know if Tom feels equipped to speak to that, or if there's anyone else who feels equipped to speak to that. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot if you're not wanting to talk about it.
No, I don't. Well, I mean, we are continuing to work on the dreaded arrearage here. I think with focusing on, well, one of the things we have been doing for a number of years we used to have we've had two different ranges for compact discs on site. So we've been over the course of the last, let's say, I think last 5 years, cataloging, and because a lot of those actually had two copies shelved together, we actually did not count those arrearage, and so what we've been doing is it has been decreasing the arrearage through that, but also in the course of that, overlaying new copy from OCLC and really getting to clean up a lot of our data for that. And we've also been moving into cataloging LPs and for various labels. So you'll see a lot of cleaner records now being uploaded into there. A lot of variants being brought out in new records, focusing on a lot of major labels. Some of us with various expertise have been working on. Karen has been working on Balkanton and other Cyrillic labels. I've been working on some German labels, and some other people have been working on other things. And I know there's been also a push to start doing more L78 cataloging. For like Edison and whatnot.
All right, thanks, Tom. All that stuff sounds very exciting over there to do. And if you haven't had a chance to look at the LC report yet, it's pretty fantastic, in my opinion. A lot of what's the cataloging numbers that NAVCC has been able to put together over the past year. So it's pretty cool from that vantage point. Okay, I see a question in the chat from, this is an OCLC question for Jay. The question is, are local save files accessible in Record Manager and local constant data records as well?
I'm not an expert on how Record Manager works, but my understanding is that if you have set things up correctly, and you can get help with that if you contact OCLC support. If you've set things up correctly, yes, you should be able to get your local save files should be available regardless of what interface you're using. And I believe that would lead me to believe that it's probably the same case with local constant data.
All right. We have a question from Mark Scharfinger, and this is for you, Jay. What's the current turnaround time for fixing stuff submitted through online error reports?
I'm not sure exactly what the turnaround time is for error reports, but I think it's fairly quick, except obviously for for duplicates, because they are generally much more time consuming, and we do have some backlogs. But Mark, is there something that you've reported that a while ago that hasn't been fixed?
No, frankly,
Oh, okay.
I'm a lazy person. I don't go back and check, but I was just
Okay.
curious because you might have seen I did a posting to MLAL and MOUG about some heading stuff, and I actually went through and sorted out all of those things and reported them to OCLC. And I was just curious as to how long it would be before they might get fixed. I think it was, I don't know, at least 3 dozen records that I reported.
Do you reported those to bib change?
I
Uh,
used the online error
Oh, okay.
little
Yeah,
thingy bobber.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, I mean, it goes, regardless, it goes to the same place. Yeah. Depending on how big a project like that is, and especially if it requires examination of each individual record, as opposed to being able to be done through an automated process where a human being doesn't have to look at each record. If it's the latter, that is, a human doesn't have to look at each record, it can get done fairly quickly. And if it could take, it would obviously take longer if we had to make decisions about each individual record,
Right.
as humans. Yeah.
Now, in this case, I included the record number in each. I included record numbers. Is there a way of formatting that makes it easier to deal with? I just basically do a number, a space, a number, and a space, and so they wrap around and stuff. Would it be easier if they were in a column or something like that? I mean, does that make any difference for you?
They can probably deal with it coming in any format, whether it's number, space, number, or by column, but I don't know. I would think that in a column might make it easier to work with, but they'll manipulate it in ways, in some way that they'll be able to deal with it in almost every case.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we move on to Hermina's question, since it's related, Casey want to know about when emailing OCLC, there are 2 addresses. There's the bib change address and the askqc @ When is it appropriate to use one versus the other?
Well, bib change we usually think of as bib as what we used to, in the olden days we used to call error reports, or reports of problems with bibliographic records, and reporting of duplicates. AskQC, although in many cases they can be interchangeable, AskQC we usually think of as more policy questions that have, and other kinds of questions that may have larger implications, rather than just an individual bibliographic record or a set of bibliographic records that you want to have changed. Does that help at all, Casey?
Sure does. That's what I thought. Just wanted to confirm. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. We have a question for Hermina directed towards me. Any updates on LC's upcoming migration to Folio? Yes, we do have update in case any of you missed it. LC selected EBSCO's Folio product for its next generation platform, which LC, if you hear it, LC refers to as LCAP, and all LCAP stands for is Library Collections Access Platform. So we love acronyms. We love acronyms more than librarians love acronyms. So hey, it's the government. What are you going to do? But anyways, yes, currently right now, subject matter experts from all over the library who are involved in acquisitions, cataloging, metadata management, BibFrame. We're in the midst of gathering use cases and stories And what LC has to do, because as with a lot of things, unfortunately, LC is a special animal, and we have to have certain requirements for what we do. So right now we're communicating a lot of that to EBSCO and saying this is what we need, this is what we would want to do. I can say that I am hopeful, I'm crossing my fingers, that it seems that a lot of shouts were heeded from quite a few of us at the library that we don't need a system that that is backward looking, that we want something that we can make extensible and go into the future. And I of the opinion that this is a good step in that direction. So we're hopeful that instead of it just being just another MARC record manager, that it's something more than that. Let's see here. There's a question from Kathy Glennon. How will LCAP impact implementing new RDA? I do not have an answer for that. I really don't know, to be quite honest. So stay tuned on that. Kathy heard a rumor. That rumor has not filtered down to me yet. Question from Mr. Scharf. He saw a PCC announcement on task groups for RDA, one of which was for MARC simplification to accommodate BibFrame, many music related items on the table. Not that I know of any specific music related things. I believe though that what Mark might be referring to as MARC simplification is that been quite a bit of back and forth with the MARC advisory group about because of issues with BibFrame conversion, it's very difficult to take a strain, a publication strain, an imprint strain, and able to, if we have a MARC record incoming, for example, and you have the 260 stuff, 264 stuff, we could parse that into BibFrame easily. But the problem is when you're coming out of BibFrame and you want to transform that back into a MARC record, is recombining that strain and then all of the crazy stuff that happens within that strain, how we've constructed that according to ISDB description and stuff. So what people in BibFrame are looking for is that they could just take that strain as they have found it, and put it back out as just a strain and not have to parse it. And I think that's a lot of what the discussion is on the MARC simplification thing. I unfortunately had to miss the part of the MARC advisory committee meeting where that was discussed, so Jay might have better insight into what happened.
Well, what happened? It was discussed, and I suppose we could say that there was also a lot of the homophone for discussed with that particular paper.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody hated it. What's going to happen? Well, what the MARC Advisory Committee asked was for the folks who wrote that paper to reconsider again, and we're not really sure if it's going to come back again as another discussion paper. That's my guess, or as a later proposal, at annual. But it's going to be we've asked them to reconsider and to come up with a better way to deal with that. It was, yeah, it was, yes, Ethan says he was there too, and it was something, yes, and Kathy as well. Yeah, it was quite a discussion.
Yeah, I really meant to be there for that discussion, but
I was having my hair done that day, but
yeah, time, I'll just say that time management does not seem to be Mac's strong suit at the moment.
it never has been.
And I'll just leave it there. Okay. Yes, Casey, you've got your hand up.
Sure, yeah, that just more about that task group that Mark asked about, that I linked added a link to the report. So that group one of their deliverables was they came up with a repertoire, as they call it, of mark fields that may or may not be included in a mark record that is converted from BibFrame. There are a few music fields in that report. It's a dense report, but if people who are interested in the inner workings of what BibFrame to mark conversion is going to look like, I'd recommend they look at it. Also, I wanted to point out that the PCC is charging a new task group to continue the work of that former task group. And it's going to be on a more ongoing basis of maintaining BibFrame to mark mappings and sort of, iteratively refining how mark records are converted from BibFrame, because there's going to come a time in the not too distant future when records will be hitting OCLC that originated in their library system as BibFrame data. And so we're going to have to learn to live with what those records look like, and maybe develop practices around how they should be enhanced or not, or those sorts of things. So that's something to kind of keep one eye on for the purposes of OCLC community. So that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Casey, for sharing that. Much appreciated. Let's see here. Other questions? Margaret, how long are we going till? Till 2:40 or 2:45?
2:45, so we're good, Jet.
Okay, all right. All right. Okay. Aaron.
So a very simple question that I should know the answer to because I've been cataloging for over 10 years. In the 240, when you're making a uniform title, you know how you can pick works, case selections, or poems, case selections. Is there any glossary or guide on where you get those terms like works, poetry, songs, all of that kind of vocabulary?
I could speak back to, I'll go back to AACR2 for just a second. There was a list of terms by example, I believe. People can correct me if I'm wrong, where there was a list of collective title terms that was carried over into what I'll call OG RDA, original RDA. But we were less than satisfied with that from an RDA perspective, because it was just giving examples. It wasn't a set list. And now it's just said, because if we put a list of terms like that out, we'd have to define them and what that means and stuff. And since we're just talking about a collective title that's very generic and stuff, there is no list, and it's sort of a free-for-all for who wants to do what, because it's really just in our view, that's sort of something that a community should, at least from the RDA point of view, but a music community or other communities should hash out what they want, because for the RSC to be stepping in there to say, well, this is what this means, as far as like descriptive terms like that, seems maybe a bit too far, and we want to afford people flexibility with that. So no, Aaron, you're not crazy. There's no list out there.
Okay, I just wondered because my quote unquote list is just looking up examples in the authority file. and seeing what
Mhm.
other people have used and finding terms from that. So I didn't know if I was missing something. So that's good to know.
Yep.
Thank you for the explanation too.
And I should add that there's also in the current in the RDA toolkit, in the community resources section, there is area where we have what we call legacy rules or legacy instructions, I should say, and where we have put together like a lot of the old, this is how you name this and this is how you should do it stuff, because the RSC made the decision that having these very prescriptive rules was not amenable to RDA for RDA going forward, especially when we're talking about how to make a label. And it just seems, since there would be so many different practices from so many different communities, people we know for a fact, people in catalogers in Europe, for example, don't particularly care for certain PCC practices. So we need to be flexible in that regard. And that's one of the big comments we got when we redid RDA, is that we don't want to do it this way. So the only way to accommodate everyone is to be like, okay, then we'll provide very general guidelines, but you'll have to come up with the specifics on your own. So that's sort of the background of all of that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, we still got a couple minutes here. Any other questions for Jay or myself? Keith.
Actually, Rebecca had one earlier that
Oh, I'm
kind of
sorry.
got swallowed, but I would kind of like to know the answer to this too. And she asked, when we delete incorrect LCSH and connection, for example, we can delete the fast headings and they will come back correctly. But what about RVM, which I believe is that French Canadian vocabulary that I can't remember what it stands for at the moment. We can't delete those. Do the counterparts to the incorrect headings hang out forever? They won't regenerate the incorrect LCSH at least, right?
I'm not positive. I'm not sure. I think they, if you take them out, they will be regenerated. But they will be regenerated based on the regarding RVM anyway. They are regenerated based on whatever's in the LCSH headings. And so if the LCSH headings have changed and you take out, excuse me, you take out the RVMs that were generated from the LCSH, they will be regenerated over time, yes. Did that answer the question? If I remember correctly, oh, go ahead.
Rebecca says in chat that it will not allow you to delete them. It gives an error message. I've never actually tried that.
That's true. That's because they are, if you're working in connection, you can't, that's right, you can't edit them. I'm sorry. If you're working in Record Manager, you are able to deal with them because they've been controlled through Record Manager. There's nothing stopping you from using both Connection Client and Record Manager, and occasionally, as in this case, it might be useful. And Tom is asking if we can extrapolate that to other vocabularies. if I remember correctly, RVM is actually will be generated only when there is a one-to-one correspondence between LCSH and RVM. And the RVM's headings are based directly on what's in LCSH. That is the headings that are in the bibliographic record. So I'm not sure that you can necessarily extrapolate from for the other controlled vocabularies in record that are controlled in Record Manager, and that you can't edit in Connection Client.
When we delete a bad LCSH and corresponding fast, we have to delete all the fast in the bib in order to trigger the process of fast getting re-added based on the now correct LCSH?
Correct. Yes.
I wasn't doing that for a really long time.
I'm sure you're not alone.
All right, Jay and Damian, thank you both so much. I think I know I learned some really good stuff here this afternoon, and I appreciate it. And if everyone, I think you're getting some applause on Zoom with the reactions, and please count mine in as well. I'm going to, why don't we all take just a couple of minutes for a breather, and we're going to get ready for the business meeting here then. That's up next, and I need to load the slides, and then we'll get started with that. Thank you, everyone.